So you have ball python overload because you see them everywhere you go. You go to the expo, you see them. You look on Morph Market and you see them, and you have no reason why. Well, hey, stick around to this video, and I'm gonna try to put together sound reasoning that we use for our business plan as to why you see so many ball pythons.
These brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice. These brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Paul with Spheric Reptiles, and thank you so much for tuning into this video today on ball python overload. So in this video, what I'll be attempting to do, and you let me know if I do it correctly, is to share with you why ball pythons are the #1 reptile in that market. I mean, because there's a lot of different markets, but in particular, you do see a lot of ball pythons. And what this video would try to do, and what I would try to attempt to do, is to explain the why and how long it's been going on so that you can maybe see whether this is market fluctuation or if it's just breeders just being greedy. I mean, I think that's the thing that a lot of people think, is that a lot of ball python breeders are just greedy and they want to produce all these snakes and they have no controls and they're out of control. But, you know, we'll touch more on this in the video. The video will cover the number of ball pythons that are out there, but I'm going to also compare it to the other reptiles in the market over a 10-year span so that we can actually get a good glimpse of where this market is going, as well as for ball pythons, but all the others as well, and if the market is actually growing. And then what we'll do is we'll discuss some of the supply and demand curve trends that dictate which reptiles are produced and which ones aren't. We'll give a little bit of an explanation as to that, as well as for the third thing, what I'll try to do very quickly is to discuss with you why ball pythons are actually the #1 reptile in that market, right? And as well, the very last thing is I'll cover why breeders produce ball pythons. And more importantly, what a lot of the questions that I get from comments is, what happens to these ball pythons when they're left over, or if there is an excess of ball pythons at the end of the year and you see a breeder producing more ball pythons going into the next year? Very good questions, right? So stick around. Let me know. I'm interested in your comments. And if you like the video at the end, please like and subscribe. But more importantly, I wanted to put this out not only for you, but for me, because I do my business plan at the end of the year. It just so happens to be that time of the year going into 2025. Starting out, guys, starting out, numbers do not lie. I constantly say that. I constantly say it. Numbers just do not lie. So there is approximately, from U.S. Labor and Statistics, 350 million U.S. people. So whether they're citizens or not is irrelevant. There is 350 million people in the United States proper, right? So that includes Alaska and Hawaii, right? Well, in Hawaii, you can't have reptiles. So it's kind of hard to have Hawaii in this group, but you can't have any ball pythons in Hawaii, so this wouldn't apply to them. In Alaska, it's really cold, so I'm pretty sure that there are some keepers up there, but nonetheless, there's 350 million people in the United States. 66% of those people, according to the same statistics, own a pet. So 66% of 350 million people own a pet. Now, of those that do, 65% of those people own dogs. 49% of those people own cats. And only 5% of the people own reptiles. And that's all of the reptiles, all lumped into one. But that's still 5 million people that have reptiles. Now, the statistics didn't say whether they had 1 or 2 or 100 or 1,000. It just said that that person in that family has a reptile. And that's a pretty good statistic. And that really goes to show that reptiles do represent 3 to 5% of the market, which is about the same, guys. I didn't know if you knew this, but those that own saltwater fish, they're in the same group. So, you know, I don't know if we see a lot of saltwater fish. I don't know if you go to a lot of aquashella expos. I really love aquashella expos and aquarium expos because it gives me better ideas as to how to care for the water that I'm using for my reptiles. I don't know if you guys ever thought about that, but water chemistry is the life of everything, right? So, but anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and share with you some numbers. First thing that we're gonna look at, and this comes from morphmarket.com, very great source for I mean, it's turning into the one-stop shop for everything reptile, whether you want to ship, whether you want some statistical data, whether you want to calculate your genetic odds, you want to get in touch with some good breeders from all over the world, all over the United States, a very good platform. They don't pay me for this. It's just the way that I feel. I don't think that I would be in this industry without it. So anytime I can plug them for my hobby that I'm now deeply immersed in, I want to give them credit. So, but if nothing else, you see the screen here. On Morph Market, total from 2015 to 2024, the number of animals sold by Morph Market is 783,217. Ball pythons are 383,800. Then we go to boa constrictors, which are 37,230. Crested geckos are 53,342. Retics are 11,249. Corn snakes are 29,863. You can see leopard geckos around 35,000. I didn't put tortoises in there because they were only 447 total sold through Morph Market. I know more tortoises have been sold than that. And then lastly, guys, hog noses represent 23,968. I'm looking at my screen here as well. But you can see in total, guys, there's been a lot of movement of ball pythons through just Morph Market. And I tried to find some other proof sources, but I was unable to do so. And whenever I even asked ChatGPT, hey, let me know, they were like, hey, contact them and find out. So I was able to use the information that I already had on morphmarket.com and find this information for you. And hopefully it's helpful to show that over a 10-year time frame, that there's been a lot of ball pythons, over 383,000 sold. So, you know, you can already get in your head that that's a lot of ball pythons over a 10-year period. So that's about, if we just break it down, that's like 38,000 a year. 38,000 ball pythons are being sold a year. And remember, guys, only 5 million people in America own a reptile. So those are individuals. So they could have one or they could have 1,000, right? So of course that is the case. Sometimes you've got a breeder, they're going to have more. But if you've got a person that has a pet, they could actually have a lot of reptiles on their own too. They might not all be ball pythons, but I gave you the breakdown of all the other reptiles that have been sold. I know what you're saying, because it's the same thing that I say when I'm looking at my business plan. I'm thinking, hey, what the heck is going on? Why are there so many ball pythons? Is there a real epidemic of ball python breeding? Well, when we look at the sold numbers, and remember 38,000 per year for ball python, over 730,000 animals sold on Morph Market. Now, if we look at this screen here that discusses new, and all of this information is of December 29, 2024 at 8 p.m., right? So if we look at these numbers, the total number of animals being sold on Morph Market is 73,207. Now, if we look at ball pythons, we see that it's 37,524. Remember that 38,000 number? Now, if we look at boa constrictors, it's 4,037, crested geckos, 7,013, retics, 910, corn snakes, 2,151, leopard geckos are 2,263. We can also look at hognose snakes that are 3,175. So that's in a nutshell of the top animals that are being sold on Morph Market. Of course, this doesn't represent 100%, but I just wanted to give you guys the key players in the market, because people aren't producing these animals. That's the one thing I really want to say. People are not producing these animals and attempting to sell them shyly, right? This is a way for them to make an additional revenue, right? So anyone who breeds animals for sale, you can't look at it like, well, you can look at it however you want, but the facts is that they are making these animals to sell for profit, right? Or to at least cover their costs for the animals so they can either enjoy their hobby or they can make some money, right? So, and it's nothing wrong with either one, but the number one thing that I like about Morph Market is it's the number one seller of captive bred reptiles. There are some wild-caught reptiles being sold on there. Spheric Reptiles, we choose not to buy any wild-caught reptiles. And the beauty of all this, guys, is if we think about where ball pythons come from and all these other animals come from, if we're producing them in our homes, how much less pressure on those environments are we applying? So if we already have all the pattern morphs that we could possibly think of, how many people are going to go out and try to get a dinker or some new import of a ball python when you got a perfectly healthy, captively bred ball python that gives you all the genes that you could want, right here, right now. I mean, with over 38,000 of them being sold a year and also being put up on Morph Market a year, then we have our own source of our hobby. And that's brilliant. I mean, that's the same thing that's happening in dogs, but it's a brilliant thing. Maybe you have some comments to that, but just to show that over 10 years, those numbers don't change. This next slide will show you the market share or the market share of volume, or however you want to see the percentage of animals that are representative of the whole that have been sold compared to those right now that are being sold. So if you look, you can see that ball pythons represent 51% across the board, and it's a pretty stable number. Boa constrictors are from 5 to 6%, crested geckos are 7 to 10%, reed ticks are 2 to 1%, corn snakes are 4 to 3%, leopard geckos are 5 to 6%, hog noses are 3 to 4%. So if we look at the supply and demand curve, right? So if the demand weren't so high for ball pythons, over time that supply would diminish, right? So it wouldn't diminish within that year, but over time, if no one bought ball pythons, then there would be no ball pythons being posted in the high numbers on Morph Market or at the expos and conventions that you might go to. But because the demand is so high, the supply has to meet that demand. That's how the supply and demand curve works. It could also be is if there's, say, 40,000 ball pythons, I'll just round it up to 40,000, or say 50,000 ball pythons on the market, like it's been since 2015. Now, what's changed over time? Well, the only thing that's changed is the number of breeders that are actually breeding and selling ball pythons. So you see them more because of social media, expos. Now you got Morph Market, whereas before, only a handful of people, say if 100 people sold ball pythons, say in 2015, then they each produced about 500 ball pythons. Well, they sold them to pet stores, they sold them to people, they just sold them at expos. They did a lot, but you didn't see them all the time because social media in 2015 was nowhere near what it is now today in 2024, right? I mean, I think we all can agree upon that. Well, now let's look at 2024. So we got 100 people selling 500. Now we have 500 people selling ball pythons, but they're only producing 100. And not everybody's producing 100, but so you still end up with 50,000 ball pythons if that's the scenario over the course of a year. So the only thing that's changed is there's more people producing ball pythons, but they're not producing 500 each. They're each producing about 100, if that. So that number has stayed the same with the supply and demand curve because people aren't going to just be spending money and money and money on animals if they can't get a return on their investment. Because ultimately, once you cross that threshold and you start selling, then you want to make some money. I mean, I don't think anybody does that. Like, even if you got a garden and you overgrow your garden, you're going to try to find a way to sell those vegetables or donate those vegetables, which is the same thing that happens with ball pythons, right? So let's go into the next thing as to why it's one of the best pets. Well, it's like such a simple pet, the ball python. Like, there's a lot of the other ones that are simple, but I don't know if any of them have the simple care requirements. I mean, there's a couple like crested geckos, bearded dragons, and I didn't put bearded dragons on there. I'm so sorry. But bearded dragons, they're very easy to care for as well. But ball pythons, in a nutshell, are super simple to care for. For one, they stay small. You can keep them in a small place. Their demeanors are very, very mellow and chill compared to other species of snakes. One of the other things is they eat rodents. So you can get that either live or frozen thawed. It's up to you. But those are readily available now, especially now that we have expos and there's people producing rodents. You didn't have that back when I first started keeping reptiles. I just want to give that as a side note. You had to hunt them down and pray. They didn't move or go out of business. The other thing is they're affordable. So you can get a very nice ball python for about $250 or less. I mean, a very nice ball python compared to some other species. Another thing that is very good about ball pythons is the community that you're going to run into with reptiles you're more likely to run into someone who has a ball python. And so that means there's more information about ball pythons. And it feels like you're doing the right thing when you get one as a pet. And the fact that they're so beautiful, you can get any type of pattern morph. And not to say that other reptiles aren't, because we have a crested gecko, a bearded dragon, as well as a boa constrictor that I feel are just super beautiful. But at the end of the day, you can use your imagination and actually go and play with the color palette when you're choosing a ball python, which is one of the things that you can't do with every species. I mean, you can to some degree with some of them, but with ball pythons, you truly can let your imagination soar. And that's one of the reasons why it's the #1 pet in America. I mean, as far as reptiles go, right? So I can't say dogs or cats, but I can say in the reptile market, the ball python is the #1 reptile because it has over 50% of the market share, the market volume. So that's the majority, right? Right. I think we can all agree on that. Let's get to this thing about breeders, right? Because I'm a breeder. We have produced animals and we've sold our animals. Now, we do have a couple left over, and I'm working on a couple of them getting the feed, but that's just my own. Like, I could have sold them, but I definitely want to make sure that my animals are eating like strong eaters or voracious eaters or ferocious eaters. I don't know which word to use with that. But at the end of the day, guys, I'm still selling the ball pythons I produce. I'm not asking for an arm and a leg for them, but I just want to make sure that whoever gets them, they have a proper setup. They understand about ball pythons. In fact, I give them a reptile management book on how to take care of their ball pythons, all the way from hatchling, some problems they might have, to some successes, how to get over feeding responses, how to get over not eating, as well as how to breed. I do all of that, and I give that to anyone who buys a snake or who wants it for free. So if you want one, info@sphericreptiles.com, and I'll send you a manual as well. And you can see how it compares to what you do. And it's just another proof source. So why do breeders breed ball pythons to sell? Well, for one, there's a market for it. Like, there is a market for it. And anytime there's a market, someone will feel that demand. Like, so if someone's asking for something, someone's going to supply it, going back to that supply and demand curve. And also, it's very affordable to get into it. Ball pythons don't take up a lot of space. In fact, there's rack systems that are conducive to what they would have in the wild and what helps them to feel secure. There's another point to where people can generate income from selling ball pythons. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but there's quite a few breeders who have made some very good passive income that becomes their main source of income from breeding ball pythons. And that's just not ball pythons. That's a lot of things. That's why people are called entrepreneurs, right? They figure out a way to make money in situations where someone else hasn't. And that's the American dream, I would think. But also, breeders produce more ball pythons so that they can invest in other ball pythons. They don't just want to make the same ball python. They want to move it forward, right? They don't want to just create pastel ball pythons, even though that's the #1 ball python that's sold. Like, out of all of them, pastels, albinos, clowns, those are in like the tops, right? But breeders also are looking for ways to get their products out. So like, they could use social media, they can use an expo, they can use Morph Market. So that goes back to why you see so many of them. You see so many because people are trying to use different sources or different ways to get their animals out. I would think that I mean, you want to use as many of the free sources that you can before you have to start paying. Like, so an expo and Morph Market is where you have to pay. Social media would be free. So that's why you see people on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok advertising their animals, because it's their time and their money putting it on for these platforms so that they can sell commercials. So you didn't realize all that. But anyway, breeders breed the ball pythons for this reason. And a major reason why people breed, as to why I really got into breeding before I even started beginning to think about the business aspect, is I have an idea of a ball python that I want to make. And I've written it out. And once I make that ball python, I might be out. But I definitely won't be selling it, because this is a ball python that I've created in my mind. And once I get it, I'm going to be so overjoyed that I got it. And I'll probably be a little bit older, because it's going to take me about 8 to 10 years to get here. So that's it. That's where it comes down to, guys. People breed so that they can move their hobby forward. They can help pay for their hobby, because who wants to just dump money into something and not get anything back? But then that way it moves them towards their ultimate goal. But the question still is, what happens to these ball pythons when breeders just can't sell them, when people have them out and now they have these ball pythons? Well, for one, you can discount the price. A lot of them are discounted, so they end up being sold to either a pet store or to a person, right? Or they're given away for free, like they're rehomed. They're traded a lot of times with other breeders that might trade a collection of ball pythons that another breeder needs, and they'll get one ball python back from them so they can move their projects forward and both parties are happy. But also, a lot of these animals end up in educational institutions, so they'll end up in like some zoos. Like, there are so many types of zoos, just not the big city ones. And they'll end up going to educational programs for other people to help educate those on reptiles. But the last thing is, a lot of breeders breed rodents or they buy frozen thods in bulk. And we know that the ball pythons will live for 20 to 30 years. So most breeders don't ever exceed what they can reasonably handle. And when they do, you see them selling off their collection. Because let's face it, everybody gets into this business for something different, right? Me personally, I have a true love of reptiles, a true love for snakes. Everything, not just snakes, but even, I mean, as small as roaches and spiders that come into the house. I will rarely kill anything, like plants, you name it. If I see something I can keep it alive, I'm going to keep it alive. And now that's me. I can't speak for everybody else, but in the ball python game, people are being responsible with these animals. And for those that are not being responsible, it always comes out. It always comes out that they're not being responsible with their animals. So this video, I hope, has encouraged you as to the numbers of ball pythons, that they're not increasing, but they're basically staying the same. They still, ball pythons represent 51% of the market. It's been doing so for over 10 years. We've covered the supply and demand curve, why people keep ball pythons in high numbers, why breeders breed ball pythons, and then some possible things that happens with these snakes that you would think that people just don't want. But if you actually talk to a breeder, you'll find that it's a completely different story. A lot of these animals that aren't sold, normally when people see that their animals aren't being sold, they just stop breeding and they'll just keep the animals. I know they disappear and you never see them again, but they just keep their animals. They take care of their animals like they would any other thing, because at the end of the day, these are our pets and we love them. So if you like this video, please like. If you want to subscribe, subscribe. But more importantly, please comment and let me know what you think about this video, because this is an analysis I had to put together for my own business plan, because I want to make sure that we stay in the black on this as much as we can, because both Lynn and I both have full-time day jobs. And we just really love these reptiles. We love the community. And we hope that this message comes off as positive, because you definitely want to enjoy that time that you spend with your reptiles. And when you're with your family, guys, enjoy that time that you have with them too. And I thank you for watching.
Guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. CJ Ack, now I gotta roll with ice.